All right, good evening, everyone. This is Matt Gross on September 7th, 2018, tracking what is now Tropical Storm Florence. It's weakened the last day or two, but it is going to be a very significant hurricane again at some point in the future here after we get through the weekend. And I'm going to jump right into a lot to get to because the situation continues to escalate, particularly for the southeast and the lower mid-Atlantic. This is the GFS run at 500 millibar. I'm going to start running this forward. Here's Florence right over here. And you're going to see most models pretty much agree on a western track over the next several days. The trough ended up being even weaker, I think, than just about any model other than the Yuki-Met predicted. So that's a very, very big win for that model. And basically, it's just going to run south of Bermuda. This big old ridge is going to start pumping, and once that happens, you are going to have a hurricane moving through very, very warm water with a very, very favorable high pressure over the top, and this is going to direct it westward toward the southeast coast of the United States and really provide perfect conditions for strengthening. So if we run this forward, the ridge stays in place. Now the ridge is going to, you see it kind of does these pulsates, it gets big, it gets smaller. The exact size, orientation of it, and the timing of how long it's gonna last, that will have to be ironed out over the next several days. So that's why we're not gonna know particulars. But what we do know is that the hurricane is going to get trapped underneath it. It's going to, in all likelihood, get very, very strong and get steered directly into the coast. Now this is the GFS run. You see as we ran it forward. This is now, it goes into eastern North Carolina. This is a viable solution. Just east of this is a viable solution. Just west and southwest of this is a viable solution. This is 6 days out. Notice the timestamp here, hour 1:44, Thursday, late Thursday afternoon. So this is still a while out. 6 days, a ton can change. But what we know is that it's a very, very big concern at this point. It's not 100% going to make landfall, but it's pretty likely considering what you have here. We're going to jump now to the Euro model. That's going to have, 24-hour frames. Really, I mean, pretty similar story early on. Euro starts the storm off weaker, but the Euro has done a very poor job in predicting the intensification of the storm. So I think it's going to be stronger than what it shows. But either way, here's that ridge pushing it to the west. Now, because the Euro starts off weaker, I want to make this point. This is one of the reasons why you see this so far to the south and west. And I'm going to move the screen down here a little bit for you. The GFS, if you remember at hour 120, let me go back to it, is over here. So GFS, European, GFS, European. And what's going on here is because this storm is weaker, it doesn't penetrate, it doesn't push up against the ridge as much as the GFS would. The European model, in my opinion, is too weak early on. And if that were the case, it would be a little bit further to the north than this. But in any case, you run it forward day 6. Here it comes right toward the South Carolina coast, maybe the North Carolina-South Carolina border as it comes in, and then it runs inland. Now, here is the next part of the equation. As we get towards day 7 here and day 8, notice what happens here on the European model. This ridge ends up forming a weird shape here where it builds in over the top, over into the Ohio Valley and back toward even in the Tennessee Valley. So the 591 thickness line is pretty much engulfed the storm. And what this is going to do is it is going to cause it to slow down, meaning that this circulation is going to dump obscene amounts of rain wherever this comes in, assuming that it does come in. Again, it's not 100% going to make landfall, but wherever this goes, you are talking about ridiculous amounts of rainfall. Remember, these are 24-hour increments. So it goes from here at day 6 to here at day 8. That means everybody in between in the Carolinas and Southeast and Southern Virginia on the European model solution would get hammered with significant amounts of rain. It's very, very similar in the GFS. In fact, we have a more detailed map here on the GFS. Here the storm comes. This is now day 5 right here, and we're going to run it forward. Now here's day 6. Hour 144, making landfall as a major, major hurricane. This is all likely to Category 4 on the GFS. It would be one of the stronger storms to ever hit North Carolina if this occurred. I think only Hazel was stronger that we have in the historical record in terms of pressure. But now watch this here. GFS here day 6. Now remember, these are going to be 6-hour increments. So 6, 12, 18, 24 hours. Notice, in 24 hours, it went from a landfall right around Morehead City to just right around Richmond, Virginia. In 24 hours, these tropical systems can dump a foot of rain, easily a foot of rain in 24 hours if you happen to get trapped under the heavy bands with this. And the thing about the GFS that's key is because, remember, the GFS came in a little bit further to the east, it stays closer to the ocean, meaning that it would still be drawing in moisture on the side. Now, at day 6 or 7, these models suck at properly forecasting rainfall amounts and where moisture is going to tap into. But we know from the direction, from the speed that this is moving, from historical precedents, and just the fact that this is going to have a tap into the ocean if it stays this close, this far to the east, you are talking about tremendous amounts of rain. And anybody who's been living in Northern Virginia or Maryland or Southern New Jersey or especially Pennsylvania knows that that area cannot take any more rain. They're going to get more rain from Gordon, from the remnants of Gordon, over the next few days, and then this thing has a chance to come up and play. And I would just be very, very concerned about flooding if it takes this path further north. Now, the European, where it stays down here, I'll go back to the European now, where it's staying down over southwestern Virginia, and see, it still kind of doesn't even move, and this is in 24 hours between day 8 and day 9. This would not impact the Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey areas, but this would be really, really bad for southwestern Virginia and western North Carolina. But at least in this situation, those areas haven't had, those areas haven't had quite as much rain, and B, it would be a little bit further away from the ocean, so it wouldn't maintain the tap. The GFS run, if we continue to run this forward, let's go another 24 hours, 6, 12, 18, 24. Look at this. It is still over Maryland. This is now 48 hours. Another 24 hours forward, 6, 12, 18, 24. It is now just south of Long Island, dumping rain on New England. So in 3 days, 72 hours, it went from Morgan City to just off Long Island, just south of Long Island. That is an incredible opportunity for a tropical system to just dump obnoxious amounts of rain. I cannot stress this enough, that is going to be a major concern when this comes, because there's just no place for this to go. If you go back to the 500 millibar map, again, we showed the European, this is the GFS. Same idea with that 591 thickness curling around the storm, covering the northwest Atlantic and then right up into the Ohio Valley and then dipping to the Tennessee Valley. When you see a ridge surrounding a hurricane like this or a tropical system, it is not going to move very much. So number one, you've got a typical hurricane threat. But what you also have now is potentially a flooding threat as you get into the day 7 and day 8 time frame. So this is not a good situation at all for anybody living in the southeast or the lower mid-Atlantic. Again, we don't know exactly where this is going to come in, but wherever it does in places just north of that, you are probably going to get a very, very significant storm out of this. And I would start getting prepared. I would have a plan in place now. Hopefully you don't have to use it, but this is not good if you are down in these areas. So the other model I want to quickly show you here is the Yuki model, because this model has been getting, this is the model that originally predicted the motion toward the southeast, and it looks like it may be correct. So again, this is first up, the GFS. So we'll look at this. This is the GFS right here, landfalling. So you can kind of compare. These are all at hour 144 you see up here. So this is GFS. This is the European model, a little bit weaker to start off weaker. I think this might be underdone. And then here's the UK Met model. That's 949 millibars. This is probably a Category 4 hurricane as well. Notice it also has this storm either going to be Helene or Isaac back here, but that will do. That's for another time. But if the model got this right, it might be right about this. So you got to be careful. But in any case, they're all pretty close. This model, if I run it, it is basically going into South Carolina. The Yuki model ends at day 6. It does not go beyond it, but it's been verifying very, very well. And it basically the South Carolina hit. So that's good news for Pennsylvania and Maryland and folks up there, because this would probably follow the European and dump the flooding rains over here. But same idea, where you can see, just based on the way it's evolving, that the storm would probably stall on the Yuki model as well. But so that is where the 3 major models have it. The one other thing I want to note here is that a New York New England hit with the original brunt of the storm is becoming significantly less likely. And the biggest way that we know this is that all New York, New England hurricanes, all of them were moving very, very quickly at landfall when they approach landfall. This storm cannot do that. At least not if this pattern is in place. Again, I don't want to say never, because 6 days out, a lot can happen. A magical trough could appear, but I don't think it's going to appear because there hasn't been a trough over the eastern United States in weeks now. So it does not fit the pattern, and it does not fit what the models are showing at day 6. But in any case, in order to get a storm to run up the coast and hit New York or New England, it needs to be moving quickly. Every single storm that has hit New York or New England with high intensity as a tropical system was moving quickly. This storm is not going to move quickly once it gets up in this area over here. So if it goes a little bit further east, say, well, what if it goes a little bit further east? If it goes up in this area, it can absolutely do that. It would miss the coast and stall, but it would probably just sit here for 2 or 3 days and then eventually get pushed out to sea. Or, and at that point, you're at day 10, so you don't really know what it would do. But it would probably upwell cooler water if it got this far north. And, again, it would need something to rapidly move it up into this area. Otherwise, it's not going to hit that area. It's just becoming significantly less likely. With that said, everybody from basically Atlantic City on down to Jacksonville is very, very much in play right now. And again, there's still a slight chance that it'll come up here, stall us off the coast, and eventually get kicked out in day 10 or 11. But that would be a very, very complicated forecast if we went that way. Some analogs that I want to go over here just to show you what some storms have done in the past. This is one that we had looking at earlier, the Chesapeake Potomac Hurricane 1933. This one pretty much went up Chesapeake Bay. It's the only hurricane in the historical record that we have that went right up Chesapeake Bay. But notice it weakened pretty significantly to a Category 3 to a tropical storm, so the impacts were not as bad as they could have been. But the track is very, very interesting, and this one was also a better analog a few days ago when it looked like this Florence was going to get closer to Bermuda and then turn west, and you say, wow, that looks a lot like 1933. Florence is clearly going to be south of Bermuda now, so this analog not as strong as it was, but it's noteworthy because Florence could go up to Chesapeake Bay and stall, and it would be much, much stronger than this in all likelihood if we saw something like that. Continuing in a chronological order here. Dora, 1964. Dora is an interesting one because notice it turned west right about where Florence, actually a little bit further north, because Florence right now is turning west at about 25 degrees north. Florence is right about in this area right here right now. This one turned west right about 28 degrees north and continued almost due west, maybe slightly west-northwest, right into Jacksonville as a Category 3, devastated northern Florida in 1964. That has become an underrated storm in the past. It's been 55 years almost now, 54 years. But this was a very, very big one. This is probably the southernmost situation I could see based on the current setup. But that's a good one to look at. Hurricane Hugo, 1989. Classic storm, very, very similar to what I think the UK Met is showing, at least in this part, once it turns north. Not down here, but where it turns north and intensifies into a Cat 3 and then a Cat 4 here in this purple color. That is what the UK Met is pretty much showing, and very, very dangerous because the UK Met's been very, very good so far with this system. Hurricane Fran, another, I think, very, very good analog, another underrated storm that, look where this, turned west right about this point, Florence a little bit north again of what this is showing. But turned north as a very, very strong Category 3, did several $1 billion worth of damage in North Carolina, and this is a very, very plausible solution, so I like that one as well. Hurricane Floyd, 1999. This one is not as much, it doesn't work as much from an angle that it came in from, but where it does work is that it stayed along the coast, and what this did is it allowed it to have a very, very long fetch of moisture. When it came. It also interacted with a trough, so it enhanced the rainfall. Floyd is really more of a rainfall analog, but so I threw it in there for that reason, but not as much for the angle. And finally, Isabel, 2003. This is very, very similar here. Not down here because Isabel was much, much stronger than Florence is, but notice Isabel weakened down to a Cat 2 coming in. Florence could be intensified and coming in. This is kind of similar to the GFS track up to about Richmond before the GFS takes it around this way. So those are your analogs looking at it, and basically it's just very, very, very bad news for Virginia and the Carolinas. I think that is not definitely where it's going to hit. A lot can change and will change in 6 days. That's the only good news for those areas. But if Vegas were putting odds on it, those are the areas where right now you better have a hurricane plan and you better know what you're doing next week because things could get very ugly very fast after this weekend. All right, I'm Matt Gross. I will certainly be updating as this evolves.